So, Valentine's Day. It's a holiday that is filled with the expectations that we get to share with our loved ones, where people make grand gestures and small tokens to say that they love their partner, their lover, their spouse, their friend. And there's all this energy around it of what it should look like. If my significant person really loved me, then I would get maybe a dozen roses, hint, hint, maybe a dozen roses. Maybe not. I have a really good friend, and he asked me, he's a minister as well, and he asked me, so what's your title for today? And I said, let's talk about sex. He said, what? I said, let's talk about sex. Let's talk about what? I said, sex, S-E-X. Silence, silence. Silence. Well, that's very brave, was his response. All righty then. Sex. We all know what sex is, but sex is kind of the elephant in the room that we don't talk about in religion. We don't talk about it in our spiritual communities. Why is that? Well, there's this one quote that I found that's just really sums it up. This is an article that's entitled Sex, Religion, and Guilt by Maddie Silver. And she wrote this article for the Sydney Morning Herald. She writes, it's difficult to grow into healthy sexual being when you are told by religious parents and or church leaders that God created sex to be something beautiful and pure, but should only be enjoyed when? In marriage, and only between a man and a woman, and that you have to be a virgin, preferably having no sexual activity before marriage, no masturbation, I said the word out loud, oh my God, and definitely no homosexuality. Holy wow. Well, if our spiritual journey started off this way, there's no wonder there's so much confusion and guilt around sex. Around sex and religion and spirituality. I remember growing up, and of course I came from a very rigid religious background. My mom says, well, I told you about the birds and the bees, and my mom's a nurse, so of course she told me about the birds and the bees and how the body works. But as far as sex goes, no, we don't really talk about sex. The only way that we talk about sex is that it's a no-no and you don't do it before. Good girls don't do that. You don't do that before you're married. Confusion. I found this really interesting video that kind of sums it up from a religious aspect when we're talking and dealing about sex. I saw that face back there.
What seems to be the issue?
Brother Reason, we're here today because my wife doesn't really appreciate. She has some issues with the way I prepare myself before we please each other's flesh.
Please each other's flesh.
He means have sex, doctor. He can't even say that like a normal person. Come on.
So, what exactly is he doing?
He's doing everything to take me out the mood. For example, last night, he's about to go down on me.
I'll go before the throne of grace.
So my eyes are closed, ready to receive, right?
Okay.
And he's taken a while to begin, so I open my eyes to peek down at the throne.
Okay.
And this fool is praying.
Well, you gotta pray for your food before you eat, don't you, doctor?
What is there to pray for? I mean, do you feel like you're gonna get food poisoning?
Well, you see, I have to bless it. Before I sup, I have to sanctify and purify it before I offer it up as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto the Lord.
How am I supposed to prepare myself when this fool is bringing the Lord into the room, huh? I don't want the Lord watching me have sex.
Gotcha. Brother, I understand you're married and everything with your wife, and, you know, this is one bond, and, you know, you owe your body to God. And
Amen.
you done it the right way. You know,
Amen.
amen. But you have to understand, brother, maybe your wife don't want to bust it open in front of Jesus.
Who do you all think created the process of what we call sex? Who else but God would have made something so beautiful, so bountiful? Who else but God would allow me to withhold the strength to allow her to receive that intimate blessing before I received mine? Listen, doctor, if the spirit is even heavy in the room, she even receives a double portion at times. My God. Feels good in here.
So you want them type of niggas.
We can't even listen to R&B music. I love me some R. Kelly. Yes. We gotta listen to worship music.
Sexual worship music. T.D. Jakes has a wonderful album. Take me to that thing. I've got much to bring. My God.
I cannot do this. You want to pray about something, boo? Pray my racket doesn't have batteries in it.
Oh, honey. The blood of Jesus. The blood of Jesus. Listen, I thank you, doctor, for your time today. We're going to get on out of here.
Sex and religion. We use these euphemisms, don't we? I hadn't heard that one, though. The throne of grace. Yes, the throne of grace. And we don't want God watching us while we have sex. How many of you tweaked a little bit on that one? Come on. Oh, nobody's raising hands now. People at home, nobody's raising hands. Okay. So where do these euphemisms come from? Why do we feel so uncomfortable dealing and talking about our sexuality? Well, here's another quote. And this is from the book America's War on Sex, The Attack on Law, Lust, and Liberty by Dr. Marty Klein. Sexuality is religion's worst nightmare because it offers the possibility of personal autonomy. Anyone can be sexual, rich or poor, old or young, tall or short, educated or not. Religion attempts to seize sex as its own domain, claiming a monopoly or morality which primarily is about limiting sexual expression rather than ethical or rational decision-making. Sex, my friends, the condemnation of sex is not about temptation. It's about self-determination. Did you hear me? It's about self-determination. And you may be thinking, oh, well, yeah, that's how some folks feel. We don't feel that way. And that was a long while ago. But there are such things going on as purity pledges, where young people are pledging to their parents and their community that they will not have sex until they're under the umbrella of marriage. This is going on now. This is not like way back when in the days. And it even went so far in that the government subsidized a particular organization that would support these purity pledges. The ACLU had to get involved on that aspect. Why? Why do we have this? Where are we as far as today with God and sex? This is coming from an article entitled The Illusion of God's Presence by John C. Wathy. Religious emotions remains primarily infantile, with God normally in the role of a greatly exalted parent. Sexual feelings for this parental figure therefore activate that incest avoidance system, an innate mechanism that generates feelings of disgust and revulsion at the prospect of sex with close kin. The intensely pious tend to be flooded with love, lust, and revulsion. conflicting emotions of unconscious origin generated by innate mechanisms selected for neonatal survival, adult sexual pair bonding, and incest avoidance. Would you go to the next one, please? The predictable result of this conflict is an obsession with controlling or prohibiting sexual behavior, coupled with an almost irresistible drive to violate those prohibitions. How these people deal with this conflict as individuals and as religious institutions determines the variously entertaining or tragic manifestations of sexual obsession in religion. All of that means that when we have people or institutions that have rigid sexual mores, there is a higher likelihood of them acting out inappropriately sexually. All one has to do is look at religion. Look at the clergy. The clergy is God's representative on earth, so they believe. Notice I didn't include myself there. So they believe. And so that means that they attempt to walk this moral walk where sex is beneath them, right? Sex doesn't come involved in them because they are on a higher plane of spirituality. And yet, how many times do we read or hear on the news about some sexual allegations against the clergy? Quite regularly. Actually, there's been a study that says that the clergy as an occupation has a higher percentage of people crossing that line into sexual inappropriateness. From an institution perspective, you can look at the Catholic Church. Their rigidity around sex as their spiritual leaders are to take a vow of celibacy, which is denying that they are sexual beings at all. And then we hear stories upon stories about sexual abuse with children. As divine beings, human divine beings, we cannot deny our sexuality. Because what do we do energetically? We know this. We know this as metaphysicians. What we squeeze and try to control will come out in another way. Isn't that true? So we know this. And yet, when it comes to sexuality, we do a lot of suppressing, a lot of not talking about, a lot of not embracing, not calling things what they are, such as sex and masturbation, teaching people that if they masturbate, it will promote sexual promiscuity. I've heard even blindness, right? Hair on the hands, right? Why do we do those things? So let's look at where we are today with sexuality and God. This quote comes from God, Religion, and Potential Holiness of Sex. It's an article written by Rabbi Alan Lurel. There is a common perception that religion finds sex distasteful, that sexuality is somehow impure and shameful, or that at best it should only be used for procreation. Some of this discomfort comes from the Platonic view that our physicality is inferior to our non-physical aspects of mind and soul, that any physical desires are distractions or even deliberate temptations away from the higher realms of ideas and spirit. Sexual energy is quite powerful. We have this drive, this urge to connect with someone else sexually. And whether we choose to accept it or deny it is the degree of which it will either bring us joy and bliss or become anger, resentment, hostility. Sex is quite powerful. And the more that we deny that we are sexual beings, what do you think happens to us energetically? One guess, two guesses. What happens? I saw compression. What else? We detach from our bodies. And the earth. Yeah. It's really, really quite accurate. So beauty. Moving to the next quote, if you would, please, Gray. This is from Embracing Sexual Incarnation. We must always remember, though, that religion is a man-made institution that is subject to the distortion and inclinations of its leaders and its culture, but that contains within it the impulse to help elevate humanity to its highest potential by reminding us that we are manifestations of the divine. From this perspective, sex is a great gift that was given to us as a way to deeply connect with the power of life, the presence of spirit, and the ecstasy of creation. And when you look at that beauty, that joy, there's nothing wrong with that. It's through our experiences of our bodies that we experience God. It's through the experiences of our bodies that we get to connect with God. So, there isn't anything wrong with our desires. This next quote is once again from God, Religion, and the Potential Holiness of Sex by Rabbi Alan Laurel. Oh, nope, I went backwards. Nope, this is about Embracing Sexual Incarnation by Julie Clausen. We are naturally obsessed with sex because we yearn for these connections in order to experience who we really are, where we came from, and what we are capable of being. It is when we deny our bodies and refuse to embrace our flesh that we become broken. It wasn't that long ago that this couple, Mildred and Richard, had to go to court to be married to each other. 1967. That's not that long ago. We are not in the business of regulating who loves who. That is not our business. That is not our business. What is our business? Our business is about accepting the truth of what we are, that we are divine as well as human. And the last quote that I have here is, for when we repress our nature as sexual beings, we cease to be our full selves. This does not mean we must all give into every sexual impulse or desire we have, but acknowledge that they are a vital and normal part of who we are. Because it's in that acceptance, that affirmation, that acknowledgement that we are sexual beings that we then are able to discern, as opposed to suppressing it, and then when it makes itself available, we feel we don't have a choice. We just act out in that. My last slide can be seen as quite controversial. Polyamory. You know, even some of us who feel that we may have evolved spiritually, physically, may still look at this particular lifestyle as there's something wrong with those people. Those people. No, there's nothing wrong with those people. It's the way that they choose to express their sexuality. And as long as they are conscious, self-aware adults, then that's a choice that they can make, which is very different from what I'm not talking about is organizations that institutionalize women being submissive slaves to men in multiple partnerships. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about adults who choose to connect with each other in this way. And I invite you to look within if this bothers you. I invite you, because what anyone does in their bed as consenting adults is not your business. It's their choice. Same goes for bisexual. Is that your business? Only if you're in it, then it's your business. Otherwise, it's not your business. And then we come to things like role-playing, BDSM, bondage, dominance, submission. Once again, is it your business? It's not your business, as long as they are consenting, self-aware adults, and no one is getting hurt. So yeah, it's uncomfortable, but that's okay. I'm all right with that. But what I do want is I want you to take this opportunity to look at, what do you believe about sex? What do you believe about yourself as a sexual being? Is sex incompatible with your spirituality? If so, why? Why? I've spent the last year talking about acceptance of our divine human nature, So I don't think that we get these bodies that can have such pleasure at sex, at intimacy, that there's something wrong with that. I don't think the universe designs us that way. So I invite you to embrace your sexuality and your spirituality, to have fun this Valentine's Day, free and liberated from any guilt that you may still be carrying unconsciously. And Holly, please.